I'm Hannah, 28, and this was supposed to be the silver wedding anniversary of my mother and Richard, my stepfather. 100 guests, champagne fountains, and a jazz band playing in the garden of the estate I secretly owned. I sat at the head table, the place card with my name written in gold calligraphy, mocking me. Just as the photographer raised his camera for the core family portrait, Richard grabbed the microphone. The feedback screech made everyone wince, but not as much as his next words. "Hannah, sweetheart," he boomed, his voice dripping with fake affection. "Could you hop up and help the caterers check the wine? This frame is really just for the family." He gestured to Tiffany, his biological daughter, to take my seat. The silence was deafening. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply placed the battered leather notebook I'd been holding onto the white tablecloth right next to his wine glass. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked out of the party. Before I tell you what he found inside that notebook, and why his face went pale as a sheet moments later, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The gravel of the driveway crunched under my heels, a stark contrast to the smooth jazz drifting from the garden. I didn't run. I didn't look back at the tent, where 100 of the city's elite were currently watching Richard toast to 25 years of marital bliss. I walked with the steady, a measured pace of someone who has just clocked out of a very long, very exhausting shift. The valet looked at me with pity as he retrieved my 10-year-old sedan. It was parked between a Bentley and a Porsche, looking like a bruise on a perfect apple. He probably thought I was the help leaving early. In a way, he was right. I had been the help for a decade. I had been the cleaner of messes, the silent banker, the keeper of secrets. But my shift was officially over. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence inside the car was heavy, insulating me from the party noise. Through the windshield, I could see the mansion glowing against the night sky. It was magnificent. The columns, the sprawling verandas, the lit-up fountain. Richard loved this house more than he loved my mother. He loved it because it screamed old money, even though his money was new, borrowed, and mostly stolen. He walked around those halls like a king, secure in his dominion. He didn't know that the castle had fallen 6 months ago. He didn't know that the foreclosure notice he had hidden in the shredder pile had actually gone through. He didn't know that a quiet LLC named Argent Holdings had stepped in at the auction and bought the deed for $4.2 million in cash. He didn't know that Argent Holdings was me. I pulled my phone from my purse. The screen glowed in the dark car. I opened my email drafts. There was one message sitting there, written 3 weeks ago, just waiting for a reason. The subject line was administrative and dull. Notice of lease, termination and revocation of usufruct rights. Usufruct. It is a legal term. It means the right to enjoy the use and advantages of another person's property. I had granted it to them silently to keep a roof over my mother's head, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I saved him one more time, he would treat us with respect. I had bought the house to save them from humiliation. I had let him play the lord of the manor while I lived in a studio apartment and ate ramen. But tonight, he had made it clear. The table was for real family. The house was for the people who mattered. "Okay, Richard," I whispered to the empty car. "Let's see how much family you have when you don't have a roof." I tapped the send button. The progress bar zipped across the top of the screen. Sent. The email wasn't going to Richard. It was going to the bank officers and the trustees managing the property. It was the legal equivalent of pulling the plug on life support. Within 48 hours, the eviction notice would be printed. Within a week, the locks would be changed. I looked up at the house one last time. I could see Tiffany laughing on the balcony, holding a glass of champagne that my credit card had paid for. She looked radiant, secure, and completely oblivious. They were celebrating in a borrowed cage, and I had just opened the door to let the wolves in. I put the car in gear and drove away. I didn't cry. You don't cry when you take out the trash. You just wash your hands and move on. I drove for 20 minutes before I finally pulled over into a rest stop overlooking the city. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. I needed to breathe. I needed to stop moving and let the reality of what I had just done catch up to me. I know what you are probably asking. If I had the power to buy a $4.2 million house in cash, why did I wait so long? Why did I pay my stepfather's debts for a decade? Why did I let them treat me like a servant in my own property? It is easy to judge the person who stays. It is easy to look at a toxic situation from the outside and say, just leave. But when you are in it, the walls don't look like walls. They look like duty. They look like love. I became the checkbook daughter slowly. By degrees. It started when my father died. Richard stepped in. Not to fill the void, but to consume the resources. He was a visionary, which is code for a man who spends money he hasn't earned on things he doesn't need. First, it was the bridge loan to cover payroll. Then it was the second mortgage to fund Tiffany's brand launch, which cost $120,000 and resulted in exactly 0 sales. Then it was the hush money for his gambling debts. I paid it all. I paid it because I looked at my mother, fading into the wallpaper, terrified of his temper, and I thought I was buying her peace. I read a story once about how they train circus elephants. When the elephant is a baby, they tie it to a stake with a strong rope. The baby pulls and pulls, struggling with all its might. But it isn't strong enough to break the rope. Eventually, it stops trying. It learns that the limit is real. When the elephant grows up, it becomes massive, strong enough to snap that rope like a thread and tear the stake right out of the ground. But the trainers don't need a chain. They still use that same small rope. The elephant doesn't break away because it remembers the struggle of the past. It believes it is trapped, so it stays trapped. That was me. Richard tied that rope when I was 10 years old. He told me I was the boring one, the practical one, the one who didn't have sparkle like Tiffany. He conditioned me to believe that my value was purely transactional. If I fixed the problems, I was allowed to stay. If I paid the bills, I was a good daughter. I thought if I just wrote one more check, if I just saved them one more time, they would finally look at me with respect. I thought I was buying my way into their family. But tonight, sitting at that table, watching him hand my seat to Tiffany like I was furniture to be rearranged, something shifted. I looked down at the invisible rope around my ankle, and I realized a terrifying truth. The stake wasn't in the ground. The rope wasn't tied to anything. I wasn't staying because I had to. I was staying because I was afraid of who I would be without them. I wasn't the responsible one. I was the enabler. I was the fuel for their dysfunction. By secretly buying the house, I was letting Richard pretend he was a king. By covering Tiffany's debts, I was letting her pretend she was successful. I was financing their delusions at the cost of my own dignity. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry. The little girl who thought she had to earn her place was gone. She died the moment Richard picked up that microphone. The woman looking back at me was a landlord. And landlords don't tolerate tenants who destroy the property. I put the car back in gear. I wasn't just driving away from a party. I was snapping the rope. The next morning didn't bring sunlight. It brought a digital avalanche. I woke up at 7 in my quiet rental apartment to a phone that was practically vibrating off the nightstand. I didn't reach for it immediately. I made coffee first. I sat by the window and watched the world wake up, knowing that just a few miles away, Richard's world was burning down. When I finally picked up the phone, the notifications were a wall of red. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages. The first one from Richard came in at midnight, right around the time the caterers would have presented the final bill. Card declined. Fix it immediately. This is embarrassing. By 1 in the morning, the tone had shifted from command to panic. Hannah, pick up the phone. The band is threatening to leave without payment. What did you do to the account? By 3 in the morning. The mask had slipped completely. You ungrateful little bitch. I know you did this on purpose. You ruined your mother's night. You are dead to me. Then came Tiffany, my stepsister. The girl who sat in my seat and smiled while I was evicted. Her messages were less about the family honor and more about her own inconvenience. My Uber Black account is linked to that card. Hannah, I'm stuck at the venue with no ride. You are so selfish. Mom is crying because of you. I scrolled through the hate, sipping my coffee. It was fascinating. Really? They weren't asking if I was okay. They weren't asking why I left. They were furious because the service had been interrupted. I was the utility company that had shut off the power. And they were the angry customers demanding to speak to a manager. This was the moment I finally understood Richard. For years, I had asked myself the same painful question. Why does he hate me? I was the good kid. I got straight A's. I balanced his books. I saved his company. I never asked for anything. Why did he look at me with such disdain while showering Tiffany, who failed at everything she touched, with adoration? I realized then, it wasn't personal. It was structural. It was the mask of insecurity. Richard was a small man playing a big role. He knew he was a fraud. He knew his success was built on debt and lies. Every time I fixed a problem he created, every time I quietly paid a bill he couldn't afford, I wasn't just helping him. I was holding up a mirror. My competence was a direct insult to his ego. He didn't hate me because I was useless. He hated me because I was essential. I was the living proof of his failure. He needed to humiliate me, to push me out of the frame, to make himself feel big again. Tiffany, on the other hand, was safe. She was needy. She was helpless. She made him feel like a provider, a savior, a king. She fed his delusion. I threatened it. Well, Richard, I said to the empty room, deleting the voicemail without listening to it. The mirror just broke. I didn't reply to a single message. I didn't apologize. I didn't transfer the funds to cover the catering bill. Let him explain to his high society friends why the check bounced. Let him feel the weight of his own choices. I stood up and walked to my closet. I picked out my best suit. Today wasn't a day for hiding. Today was a day for business. I had a meeting with my aunt. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't going to be the one cleaning up the mess. I was going to be the one testifying to it. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. It was a small, nondescript place downtown, far removed from the country club circuit Richard frequented. I sat in a booth in the back, my hands folded on the table, watching the door. When Aunt Sarah walked in, the air in the room seemed to sharpen. Sarah was my father's sister, a corporate litigator who ate CEOs for breakfast. She had been estranged from Richard for years, mostly because she saw through him within 5 minutes of meeting him. You look tired, she said, sliding into the booth. She didn't offer a hug. We weren't huggers. We were strategists. I'm evicted, I said, a dry smile touching my lips. From the family table. Anyway. Good, she replied, placing her briefcase on the table. You stayed too long. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photocopy of the battered leather notebook I had left on the tablecloth the night before. I had scanned every page before dropping it off as my parting gift. We called it the Ledger, to Richard. It was just an old diary. He had mocked me for carrying around a symbol of my hoarding tendencies. To us, it was a forensic audit of his life. Sarah opened the notebook. I rechecked the transfers this morning, she said calmly. The embezzlement is undeniable. $4. 2 million, over 8 years. Siphoned from your mother's care fund through shell companies under Tiffany's name. Disguised as consulting fees. He wasn't just stealing from you. He was stealing from a dying woman. Every withdrawal matched a luxury purchase or a carefully timed social media post. The evidence was airtight. But that's not why we're here, I said. We're here for the house. Sarah turned to the final pages. Argent Holdings. He loved that story. 3 years earlier, when Richard nearly lost the mansion to gambling debt, he claimed a private equity firm had saved him. He never met the partners. He signed blindly, terrified of losing the address. Argent Holdings, Sarah said quietly. Hannah Argent. I'm the investor, I said. I used the insurance money my father left me, placed in a trust Richard never knew about, to buy his debt. I don't pay his bills. I own his mortgage. Every insult he hurled at me at that table happened in my house. Sarah pointed to Clause 14b, the kinship clause. He breached it. Last night, when Richard publicly declared the house was for real family only, he didn't just humiliate me, he voided the loan. By disowning me, he dissolved the required family unit and triggered immediate default. He evicted himself, Sarah said. We serve him tomorrow. That evening, Richard showed up furious, shouting that accounts were frozen and demanding I fix it. I handed him the eviction notice. You can't sue a landlord, I said evenly. He stared at the signature. Argent Holdings. Hannah Argent. I told him the truth. I bought the house at foreclosure to protect my mother. Let him stay. And let him pretend, hoping dignity might soften him. Instead, he chose exclusion. You said the table was for real family, I said. This house is for the real owner. And since I'm not family, you're trespassing. He begged. I didn't waver. You have 30 days. If you resist, the fraud audit goes to the district attorney. He left broken. 3 months later, I sold the estate. To him, it was status. To me, it was a museum of harm. I used the proceeds to fund the Argent Heritage Foundation quiet work. Meaningful work. Entirely mine. That night, I hosted dinner in my modest home. No hierarchy. No fear. Just people who chose to be there. I finally understood the victory wasn't revenge or exposure. It was realizing I never needed their table. I could build my own.